Women and tech. This week, we ask the hard question.
Has anything really changed?
Then, IPOs are hot this summer. WeWork, Uber, and Lyft.
This is Future Forward. I'm Alexa Scordato.
And I am Steve Rosenbaum. Let us launch. Hey, Alexa, how are you?
Great, Steve. Happy belated birthday.
Yeah, I'm feeling, 35 is a great age. I'm really glad to be, I might be 33. I haven't decided yet. So I want to just dive in. So I did a lot of this reading over the week getting ready for this podcast. And depending on what I read, either, boy, women in tech, things are just turning the corner. They're getting better, or no, they're kind of hosed and not great. And so I wanted to kind of hear from you before we get into the IEEE survey and a bunch of these other things, just like at the cosmic level, like on a scale of 1 to 10, women in tech, 11, 2?
Just in terms of like how good or bad it is?
No, how you're feeling about it. Alexa
How
vibe.
am I feeling about it? I think I'm feeling like a 5.5. I used to feel like a 2, so I have felt progress. But the reason why 5.5, I'm always going to be glass half full. So it's going to err on the side of progress, but it's not happening fast enough.
So here's why that's so for our listeners. The reason why that is so scary that she's saying that is that Alexa, from the time that I first met her, which is now more years than I care to admit, like literally every week someone wanted to hire her. Like for you to feel like things for women aren't getting meaningfully better means that for people that are really struggling to get, right? I mean, your phone does ring. It does in fact ring.
My phone does ring, but I mean, from where I sit, I'm lucky enough where I actually do get to talk to a lot of amazing VCs and founders. I mean, the majority of the people I do interact with are still men. You know, the ratio hasn't quite changed. It is so far from being 50-50. And even in terms of the teams, the leadership teams that I've been a part of, I am still very much a minority.
So let's dive right into this IEEE survey, because that backs up exactly what you're saying.
Yeah, so the IEEE survey was 4,500 members, and basically it sums up the fact that 60% of women are saying that they don't feel that they're treated equally in the tech field, and it just breaks down all of these different behaviors and kind of injustices that they experience on the job. Everything from hearing demeaning comments, witnessing sexist behavior at offsite meetings or conferences. I mean, the statistics just kind of go on. And I'll be honest, going through point by point, none of it was surprising. It's kind of old news. And so in some ways you can read this and say, this is horrible. How could this be happening? But at the same time, I mean, it's really important that these surveys get conducted, that these issues continue to be covered, just so that we can have conversations like this one.
So maybe this isn't right for this podcast, but I'll ask it anyway. Like, is tech uniquely bad? I mean, is it worse in fashion? Is it worse in finance? I have a feeling it's worse in tech, and I have some thoughts about why, but I thought I'd let you take a swing at that.
I mean, tech now is so much at the intersection of every single industry. And so in some ways, I think it might be amplifying or accelerating the disparity that might already exist. So by that, I mean, like, if you can say, oh, there's this imbalance in fashion or in finance. This is part of the thing that like annoys me with like Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. We already have this challenge with women not earning as much as men, not being as financially fluent. And now all of a sudden you layer in technology where there's also this gap, and it's almost just accelerating, I think, the conversation between men and women.
So let's shift a little bit to founders. So TechCrunch also did, I don't know if it's a survey, as much as it's more of an analysis of the market. And they were looking at VCs and female founders and trying to see kind of whether things were on the rise. And again, not as bad as it was, but certainly still some inherent bad decision making in the venture world about how to fund women, about whether only women should fund women, essentially about whether or not women are equals. When you walk in the room with your startup, does the VC on the other side of the table, male or female, look at you and say, "Oh, here's an interesting company," or do they say, "Here's an interesting woman-led company"?
I think it's still the latter.
Yeah, I do too.
It's like affirmative action, and so that can be really a controversial way of looking at it. If every single VC fund in the Valley were to say, we are going to invest a certain percentage of our deals towards female founders, I don't know, I'd have mixed feelings about that. But at the same time, if you don't actually put measures like that in place, then the needle's not going to move. You're still going to have 3% of deal flow going to women.
So one of, I think, the unspoken hypocrisies of venture is this idea that secretly they think, not all women, of course, not all men, but they really want founders to be kind of like eating nails for breakfast, driven, sharp-elbowed, if when necessary, assholes, and they worry that women as a species are just a little too nice.
So investing is an emotional thing, and I think at the end of the day, people are going to fund founders who make them feel safe and who make them feel confident that their money is going to yield a return. And so there's so much that probably goes into why men don't fund women. Some of it is a pipeline issue where there just aren't as many women founding companies. But second is when it comes to the pitch, the presentation, knowledge of the product or the space, there's so much bias that goes into that.
Are there examples of either venture VCs or funds that you think are doing it right?
Oh man, are you familiar with Backstage Capital?
No.
So Arlen Hamilton is such a badass. She's sort of like a hero in the sense, she's a hero for me at least, because she's black, a woman, and queer. And so she started a Backstage Capital from scratch. She got funding from Stuart Butterfield from Slack, Andreessen Horowitz, Chris Sacca, and she just worked her way up from basically like sleeping on the floor in SFO, totally broke. And she started this fund on the belief that diverse founders need capital, need working capital. And so Backstage Capital, I think, has $36 million, and they've actually exhausted those funds and invested in LGBTQ entrepreneurs, women, and people of color.
Wow, that's fabulous. Did not know that. So before there was an article that I pulled up that had some other founders, some other kind of women founders, not VCs but startup founders, who they suggested were kind of doing it right. And it was funny. My first reaction, this is my bias, so I'm admitting it. My first reaction as I scrolled through the Forbes article was, oh, look, that's like, how cool is it that there are these women partner founders? And then I was like, if those were two guys, there wouldn't have been any register in my brain that there was anything unusual about two men starting a company. So the fact that two women starting a company was unusual kind of made me feel bad that I thought that,
Yeah, absolutely. And there's so much we can go into on this topic. So if you look at the Forbes article, it lists the founders of The Skim, Glam Squad, LearnVest, Birchbox, Ellevest, Girls Who Code. I mean, like all great organizations. But, my reaction to these things is we have yet to kind of see a female founder have a massive, massive exit that makes a statement. When you think about the IPOs that we're talking about, whether it's Uber, Lyft, Etsy, etc., like it's not women driving the conversation. And unfortunately, I think the women who have sort of gotten the most airtime, at least in 2019, like the Theranos, right?
Yeah.
It's like actually all in through the lens of controversy. So that kind of is what worries me is I feel like we're not going to move the needle on the VC conversation in women in tech until there is enough of a tipping point of women having successful exits. Like it's no longer enough to just raise money and have a company that's, growing. Like we need a woman to hit a home run.
You need a unicorn woman.
Yes, we need a unicorn woman.
I think there's probably a Halloween costume in there somewhere. That's actually very funny. So of these four, so let's take apart the Forbes article for a second. Because this was the thought I had when I read it, and I was going to ask you, did you feel like these were appropriate? Were these the right stories to tell, or was it are these the glam? None of them were running, anything grimy or techie, really, right? I mean,
yeah, I think any coverage of women founding companies is good because representation matters. The more you reinforce this idea that women can go out there, raise capital, and lead is good. To the extent, though, that these articles can dig in and just talk about how these women have grit or how they're fantastic operators or how their companies are, wildly innovative. I mean, we just need to see more substance. I actually always kind of have mixed feelings when I get invited to women in tech panels because I'm so tired of being a woman in tech. I kind of just want to go on stage and talk about being a good marketer and it's just implied oh, I can see Alexa, she's a woman. And so that's kind of what my reaction to all of these articles is it's great that women are getting profiled, but at the same time, I want to see them get profiled for their work product and just the fact that they happen to be women, people will start making those associations in their head.
So I have to tell you, so my experience, for example, at South by Southwest in the last couple of years is that they've made a real concerted effort to have the panels represent the audience and be diverse in all kinds of ways. And as somebody that often produces panels for South by, the first reaction is, oh man, that's more work, because the truth of the matter is my network is it more men than women? It might not be, as I say that, but for things like South by to make a commitment to say, we don't want this to be an anomaly. Hey, look, we have 3 women on stage. We just want it to be the best, smartest people in the room. I think has made that conference measurably better as an attendee.
Mm-hmm. But that's a great example of how people need to institute policy, both editorial, conference organizers, even VCs, right? It's a systemic challenge, and so there's no silver bullet here. But I think again, there's an aspect of this where it's oh my gosh, women in tech, we're beating a dead horse. Everyone knows it's a problem. I actually think it's more important now to have real conversations about women in tech because we live in a Me Too era. And I think for the progress that we might have seen in say the last 10 years around women in tech, the Me Too conversation might have actually taken us back a few years.
Explain that.
because men are
I didn't
scared.
I didn't think that was where you were going to go. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just think it's, I think you were asking me, like, how do I feel optimistic or pessimistic? The real conversation isn't so much about the coverage or are we making progress. I think it nuance that's happening right now in real time, where men are actually scared to mentor women, to be alone in the same room with a woman unsupervised because of the optics around it. I mean, this is just sort of like ears to the ground, just conversations that I have with women in leadership positions or who are founders. And, I think there's a sense of maybe this is progress. I have women I have friends who've gone out and who've, had really unfortunate circumstances raising money where they thought they were getting a term sheet and instead, someone was asking them out on a date, right? Really bad things like that. And so I think what's happening right now is like there is I want to say maybe there's like fear, right? And there's an aspect of accountability, like, oh, if I have bad behavior, I might actually be called out for it, right? Which is a good thing, but it's actually then leading to inaction in some places.
It's funny. I was thinking about this literally the other day. There was some bit of news of which I was reminded that the Vice President of the United States won't meet with a woman alone in his office. And I found myself wondering,
there you go. It's not just tech.
Is it he's afraid that he won't control himself and he'll behave badly, or that women will accuse him of inappropriate behavior that he won't ever do, but that somehow he'll be, that I couldn't figure out which version of that was the reason that he was afraid to have a woman in his office. But you're exactly right. There definitely is some sense that, look, to me that makes no sense at all, because why would anybody who's in business impale their career on a false accusation? Like, what do they think they're gonna, like? Were they such a feeble founder that they needed to do fake sexual harassment to make a living? Like, well then just go rob a bank. I mean, there's easier ways to steal money from people. I don't believe that there's, I think that the accusations that have come out, particularly in the entertainment space, and we know the names, are all entirely and unassailably true.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I mean, it's not just tech. Again, it's everywhere. But kind of tying this all together, it's just that in now that tech is part of every single industry, and I'd say people in positions of privilege and power in technology can do so much. It's just a critical time. I think we just need to continue to have these conversations. But I am searching for more substance, and I'm really keeping my fingers crossed and rooting for women. I want women to succeed, and because all boats rise together.
So just kind of to wrap things up and bring it back around. I mean, if you look at the charts in the Crunchbase report, I mean, they're gloomy, but moving gently and somewhat measurably in the right direction, right? I mean, just slowly.
Yeah, and I think change kind of happens with every single generation. The more women become wealthy, whether that is through starting companies or being female VCs, they'll continue to invest more in other women. But I think it's going to actually be, it's not going to accelerate. I think this is kind of the pace. This is what it is.
All right. So just to kind of wrap up this chapter, for our male listeners, Alexa, 2 or 3 bits of advice that you would give them about like how to actually be on the right side of this change.
Oh my goodness. This is put me on the spot, Steve.
Yeah, but
Okay.
you talk about this all the time. I mean, it's like,
One is just check your bias. Everyone has some type of prejudice. And so to the extent that you can actually be aware of your own, go take an unconscious bias test. Literally Google it. They exist online. Two, every single time you find yourself endorsing a man's work, ask yourself, can you also endorse a woman's work? And I think conference organizers, that's why they're saying make your panels 50-50. When you think about hiring, if you were to hire a male candidate who's going to do the same job as a woman on your staff, if that guy negotiated a salary that's higher than what the woman is currently making on the job, doing the same job, literally give her a raise to match the new hire's newly negotiated salary. There are all these like little micro things that people can do. And then I'd say the third is if you're a guy coming down on the right side of history, you will actually take a risk. The thing that you're not sure of, that you're not isn't something that you normally wouldn't do. Push yourself to go out of your comfort zone.
I think that's really, by the way, for on the fly, I think that's really good advice. And I'm going to do the unconscious bias test. Although now I'm a little scared. I'm a little nervous. Have you done it?
Yeah. I think everyone should do it.
All right. Well, you know what? We'll put a link to a good one in the show notes. All right. So moving on, chapter 2. Let's talk about this WeWork IPO.
Oh man, woof.
Are you're not hopeful that it's going to be wildly successful?
No, I don't think so. I mean, everything about the way the founder behaved and the headlines surrounding him always make me wary. And I just think it's ironic because I actually really have used WeWork as a digital nomad, but I'm not as optimistic about the.
So if you dig into the IPO paperwork, when I've read it, I mean, the numbers are a little bit scary. I mean, they're losing a lot of money.
Which ones? All of them? Yeah.
I mean, no, not the, no.
But is that surprising? It's like,
no, the larger company has all kinds of fingers and lots of pies. I mean, little known, doesn't get remembered except by our friends. But among other things, they bought Meetup.
Right.
Which, near and dear to my heart. Meetup, host and organizer for many, many years, and love the organization, love the product. Not sure how it fits inside the WeWork frame.
I think WeWork has sort of tried to paint a picture of being this physical epicenter of the modern day professional. And so they also they're also investing in programming, like wellness programming. And so I think the notion of being a social hub, a professional hub, a health hub, that's what they want to do. And that's kind of weird, right? It's weird because we work in tech. And so this notion of creating an online business that has economies of scale and is highly efficient, WeWork is actually just the opposite of that. It just has really good marketing.
Well, and came along at a time when there were lots of people stacking up like planes at LaGuardia at Starbucks trying to find a plug so that they could work all day. I mean,
right.
I mean, the digital nomad story is a relatively, when I should know this, when was WeWork founded? How long have they been around?
Oh my gosh.
Is it 10 years or not even?
Maybe just 10 years. Let's see.
And I will tell you as a founder.
2010.
Yeah. As a founder who rented 3 office spaces in New York and grew from 1 floor to 8, 1 floor at a time with one landlord, I spent an inordinate, disproportionate amount of time dealing with real estate. It was a much larger piece of my remit than it should have been. And so
you feel like WeWork at its core is still an innovative business? because it saves in the way that you can kind of like spin up a cloud with server space. That you think of WeWork as a landlord who can spin up more office space for you without the hassle.
Well, I mean, the history is, people that own buildings in New York are set in their ways. They don't like you growing and getting bigger. They don't like you shrinking and getting smaller. They like tenants that show up, take a bunch of space, use it, pay their rent for 10 years. Like that's what makes them happy. And so WeWork comes in and says, we'll take the building, we'll take the floors, we'll either buy the building, we'll rent it, and we'll repackage it, but we're taking the risk and we're dealing with all the ins and outs and move in and move out and retrofit stuff. I mean, I think that that's a business. I just think, what happens when you're more than two people and three desks,
So when you read that,
yeah, go ahead.
oh, go ahead.
I'm a fan, and disclosure, personal friends with the founder of a kind of a next gen flexible office space company that's now all over the world called Notel, and I love the Notel spaces.
I believe that people should have great places to work, physical office spaces, and take out the hassle of dealing with landlords, etc. I just don't think WeWork can consolidate the space and then the way they're managed. I mean, when you see that their founder, their CEO cashed out $700 million ahead of that IPO, is there any way to read that headline and think that's a good thing?
Yeah, I'm not even sure I understand how you can do that. I mean, it's essentially he's betting against his company's success in the IPO market.
Again, I actually wasn't even sure that that was possible.
Yeah.
Because, I've been through an IPO process with one of the companies that I worked at, and we were kind of on lockdown, like the dark period when you're doing your S1. Like, I feel like the fact that there are this many headlines about it is actually really ominous.
Yeah, no, it's bad. And if I were an investor, look, the whole let's just say for our listeners that aren't deep in tech finance, the whole IPO thing is all the people that invested, they want to get their shares in IPO, they want to get through their lockup period, they want to hold their breath till the lockup period ends, and then they want to sell. Like that's their exit, right? So,
right.
It's not just the day of the IPO that on paper they have the money, but they can't sell the shares the next day.
Right.
So they're holding their breath for whatever the lockup period is, usually 6 months, and hoping the company doesn't fall off a cliff. If I were a WeWork investor right now, 6 months would seem like a really long time from now.
And we wonder why people aren't investing more in women. Like it drives me crazy though when I actually see the juxtaposition of WeWork CEO and then all these really capable women I know who have such a hard time securing funding, because I'm like, man, what did this guy do where he was just able to make it?
All right, so let's just talk for a minute. We have a few minutes left. Let's just talk for a minute about the Lyft and the Uber IPOs, because the headline that caught my eye there was there were two. One was MarketWatch saying Uber and Lyft IPOs mean the cheap rides are coming to an end. And that's been my experience. And then the other headline was why the Lyft was the worst thing to happen to the IPO market. The Lyft IPO was particularly terrible and downward spiral, which is surprising because, from a rider perspective, I don't see Lyft as being any different than Uber.
If anything, the differences are it's like a happier brand. It doesn't have sort of the controversy around it that Uber did.
Yeah, on the other hand, Uber is in a lot of other businesses. They're in driverless cars. They're in food delivery.
Uber Eats.
The logistics. They have this whole speech about how they're a last mile company. Lyft, I think, really is more of a car company, more of a. So, if you're trying to bet for the long term, I guess I understand why Uber might seem more appealing. But in both cases, neither of the IPOs were particularly good stories. And my experience, I don't know about yours, is that the price of an Uber ride is absolutely going up.
It is going. So I think the cheap rides are coming to an end in markets that are mature, where it's sort of established that the competition is what it is. The market penetration is basically maybe 100% or close to it. The cheap rides, I think, were really just almost like a race, not race to the bottom, but it was just a way to acquire users.
Yeah.
It was a way to get people onto the apps.
Yeah. And it worked.
So I mean, there's still, I think there's still cheap rides, but it's in markets that they're not in yet.
We are out of time. We have solved no problems this week, listeners. I'm sorry. The IPO market remains troubled, and women in tech slightly better, but nowhere near solved. So we will put in the show notes a unconscious bias check, and I will report back next week. Hopefully good news.
And we'll have happier stories, hopefully.
All right.
More optimistic stories.
Indeed. Have a good week. See you next week.
See you, Steve.
All right, we're clear.